and gentlemen, if I can have your attention, please. Folks in the back, we're going to start this discussion tonight. It is a panel on the idea of race and what race means. I want to thank you all for coming. This is going to be run a little bit like a Quaker meeting. All of you Quakers, raise your hand.
What's a Quaker?
So a Quaker meeting is like this. You all gather in a conversation. Some of you can sit on the floor. The floor was washed clean today, so it's only got a little bit of dirt on it. And take seats as you will. We have 4 folks that are here that I've invited to bring out today to have this conversation, and hopefully we'll all gain a little bit. So if you are in a Quaker meeting and the Spirit moves you to speak, you speak. And I will try to moderate that speech so that we don't have just one-sided conversation, and there is a little back and forth. And I really do want to greatly appreciate and thank you all of you for coming. There is one more panelist who's not here yet. She's one of the artists. She's stuck on a bus, and now she's stuck in a cab. So when she comes in, if you would just kind of let her come down. I'd like to begin the conversation just by a really brief introduction, and let them speak and tell you a little bit about themselves. My name is David Fenn. I'm the curator of the show. I hope that you're enjoying it. And it came about as a great discussion between Kazuko and I about what race is, and is it real, is it not real, is it a construct, and how does that impact us, specifically, I guess, me as an American and her as a Japanese woman in America, and the idea kind of blossomed from that. So from the folks that I know, and some folks that Kazuko know, and some folks I just met, that we are going to have this discussion. So let me begin by introducing Yarrow Dunham, who is a professor from Yale, and I'll let Yarrow tell you a little bit about himself.
Sure. Hi everyone, thanks. It's fun to be here. I'm a developmental psychologist, so I study how children learn to reason about the world, and in particular, how they learn to reason about other people. And more specifically, the thing that I'm fascinated by is this sort of shift that happens in children's reasoning, where they go from thinking about other people solely as unique individuals, sort of the snowflake model. Every single person is different. And at some point, they tune in to this way of thinking that we have as adults, which is that people are not simply individuals. They also are, in some vague sense, representatives of kinds of people. So if they're looking at someone like me, my name's Yarrow, as you heard, they go from thinking about me as merely Yarrow, one isolated individual, to a sort of a representative of some category. So I am suddenly white and male and American and so on. And that is a really different and kind of interesting way to think about people, because it now means I'm not simply one, I am now a representative of a category. What they know about the category influences how they think about me, and vice versa. So the birth of a lot of things that we worry about, like stereotyping and prejudice, happens from that moment, once you think about people as not unique individuals, but as categories. But also maybe the birth of some things we're less troubled by, like ethnic identity and group-based culture. So it's not necessarily all a bad thing, but what I study is how do kids make that sort of inductive leap? How do they learn about categories like race, like gender, like nationality, caste, and so on?
Great, okay. Next we have Bobby Watlington, who is graciously has jumped in here at the last moment, and I want to thank you for that.
Yes, my name is Bobby Watlington, and I've always found this topic fascinating, only because I who lived in this neighborhood for 50 years, have seen people who have arrived in this country in the early 30s, and when they were getting their naturalization papers, there was a segment that said race, and it would be Ukrainian. Why I mention that is that because of the insecurity of most of us in this country, and we really don't have a true identity, because unfortunately the only true American culture comes out of the product of slavery, not because they were brilliant, but because they were stripped of their identity. So
Well, how about
therefore,
us Native Americans? What the fuck do you call us Native Americans, you son of a bitch? What the fuck do you call us?
Asians.
You talking
Anyway,
about them blacks? You talking them goddamn blacks? I know some Indians here in New York City, but kick your fucking ass for saying something like that.
You're brilliant,
That's
Steve.
an insult.
Steve.
That's a fucking insult.
Well,
That's
Steve,
a goddamn insult. That's a fucking insult.
Whoa.
Okay, okay.
Steve, be cool. You're here. We know you. Respect you. So let's continue respecting you. The fact is that when you say, especially when you mention the American Indian, he crossed the Bering States from Asia. So therefore, everyone's an immigrant if you're going to use that type of naivete. But what I'm trying to say, as a black man, an American black man, which I stress, I've had to encounter situations that, because my presentation deviated from the stereotypical images that most middle-class Caucasians expected, I would be confronted as an aberration. What I mean is simply that race is something that makes them secure when they have no real security. Again, I'll get back to what I was saying. The American Negro was able to produce from many cultures, because he was stripped of his identity, the greatest thing the Western world has ever seen. When I was an American Negro, I created jazz, I created gospel, I created so many great things. As an African American, well, unfortunately, I created hip hop.
Here, here. So now I'd like to introduce to you Robert Lee, and Robert is from the Asian American Culture
Art Center.
Art Center. Okay. So Mr. Lee.
When I look at you all, I realize the important thing to say is that it's wonderful to be here with all of you, because we are the people of color on this earth. We are the people with the spiritual essence that's in the center of our culture. We will share this world together, and I embrace you all. I thank you all for being here. You all look beautiful. The next thing to say is a lot of words, and we can argue about these words, but let's come back to the thing that we know in our hearts about who we are and how we are together. The words, okay? I'm here to say something specific about Asian Americans, because I recently wrote a letter to the Metropolitan Museum of the Arts, criticizing them on the exhibition that they have called China, Through the Looking Glass. Now, you have to realize that many of the angry letters that we're getting, particularly up in Boston at the Museum of Fine Arts, because the Asian American community protested against Kimono Wednesdays. If you don't know about it, Kimono Wednesdays, and a lot of people from Japan are very upset, and they don't even know that who or what Asian Americans are, and they've created a new name for who we are. But this kind of confrontation has been going on for 10 years in San Francisco, where the Hirshhorn Asian Art Museum in San Francisco has had an Asian American community, very well organized, has a beautiful website called Asians with an S Museum, ridiculing and laughing and with great analysis from scholars about what is wrong with the cultural tactic that they're taking. So this has been going on not just at the Met recently, but throughout the country in these particular 3 shows that I mentioned, of an effort to re-establish a stereotype and Orientalism of Asians. And they're taking advantage of a moment when we seem to be relaxed about these things. And that Asians are making progress and are making a stand and doing well, having, good jobs in the country to a certain extent, although many of them don't. 10% of Chinatown don't speak English, and
Hey, don't forget those
they,
people down
they,
south.
they don't even speak good Chinese. And they
Don't
just
forget
stay in
that crowd.
Chinatown because they want to get a good stereo, that's all.
Right.
They don't have, they're coming from the countryside of China. They don't have that ambition. So, the model stereotype, model minority stereotype is not true. The poorest people in New York City has now been documented to be Asians. They're the poorest. You see them going around collecting plastic bottles. So this kind of opportunity to reestablish the Orientalism of Asians is a national tactic. And a lot of Asians who are now doing well are very good at fighting for government grants to provide health, education, and other kinds of services for the Asian community.
Do you think that
But they are very, very inept and without understanding of how Asian image is crucial to who we are in this country and how we can make a place for ourselves, a home for ourselves, and be here with you as brothers and sisters because of the stereotype and the image that is created by the mainstream to pit us against other people of color. And that's crucial why this has to be pointed out and why I wrote the letter, to make sure people begin to understand how to fight the images that are being created for us and how to support those artists who are creating new images of ourselves, to find our artistic heroes who are able to do that.
Mr. Lee, do you feel that this is intentional on the part of the museums, that they are forthrightly making this decision and say, well, this may be racist, but we're going to do it, or do you think that they're just not thinking about it?
I think on a certain level, there is a level on which it's naive, and people think, oh, you're just trying on a kimono, how much harm can that be? What's that? But on a higher level, people who run institutions know exactly what the hell they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing, and always has been pitting blacks against yellows. There's a long history of this on the island of Jamaica. There's a long history of that throughout the modern world, the history of the modern world. There's been two Chinas, there's been two Vietnams. Who's the real Vietnam? Please stand up. Who's the real China? Please stand up. This is two World Trade Center towers. That's a tactic of sculpture, of architecture, and of national racial policy.
Bobby?
I want to say something. As with most groups, Jews, blacks, etc., those that acquire or achieve a certain amount of notoriety and success, generally, as in the Asian situation, kick the people who are unfortunate to the side. I attended a meeting at NYU years ago where the rich Asians wanted to displace all those very people that you mentioned about. And the thing is, they have no real force behind them. Oh, of course you have a couple of East Village yippies, hippies, or whatever that get out and parade, but the power that's been obtained and achieved by the capitalist segment of the Asian community should be forced to stand up and unite and support your cause.
They are united, and they are not standing up for what those of us who are coming from community and coming out of the civil rights movement and understand the history of this country and its racism and its slavery. They're not there. And unfortunately, I could mention names, but it's a certain amount of class analysis to understand that those people are benefiting from the way in which a white society wants the world to go. And there are winners in that society, and there are losers. And we need to change the nature of a society that does not depend on winners and losers.
Okay, well, you're very, that's a great place to pause also. And you're absolutely right. Cheryl Edwards has just come in, literally off the bus. And I wanted, Cheryl, can you just tell us a little bit about who you are and you know, what you're doing?
Okay, I'm Cheryl Edwards. I just got here from DC. The bus left late, the driver got sick, but I'm here. And I'm an artist. I used to live in New York for 10 years, and I've been in DC for 20 years. I took classes while I was litigating in New York for 10 years at night with Ernest Critchlow at the Art Student League, and I've been painting ever since 27 years. So I'm here today because I have a message about raciality for you.
Okay, so I think we're at a point right now where I had a personally really interesting conversation with David a couple of weeks ago, where I had never questioned the idea, the concept of race as a thing. I had, in my head, thought, oh, obviously there are lots of different races. And his point was saying, there really aren't a lot of different races. We are kind of one race. And the idea came that if we somehow encountered an alien planet, how would we first describe ourselves? Probably as human. I don't know that we would say, I'm John from New Jersey. You know, we would probably say I'm from the planet Earth, I'm a human being, you know, something a little bigger. But there is certainly something that makes us different. And it's and I guess the question is it more than just our skin and the contours of our skull, or is that thing universal?
It's cultural ethos.
Cultural ethos. Would you like to expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, starting with African cultures. I don't want to do a whole history lesson, but ethos, of course, means worldview. And what you have through migrations is a series of different worldviews. But the essential original worldview, as archaeologists tell us, this is 77,000 years of history, was African. And Africans migrated to China, and they were called the Nagas. That you go online, you can look that up. So they say from Naga to nigger. The Nagas were the first Buddhists. That's why they have the curly hair. And then they got to be light-skinned. But recently, the Chinese scientists have realized, and they thought they were a separate race, but they realized that they have African heritage. So what we're talking about is a room full of Africans, but dominance, the concept of dominance is what created race. And in this American experiment, when there were too many Africans here, they made a clarion call for so-called white people to come so that they wouldn't be outnumbered, and so that if there were any uprisings, they wouldn't be wiped out. Early on, whites were relegated to slavery as well. And then when they complained, they elevated them a bit, so now we have, you know, where no matter where you come from in the world, you can always be racially dominant or above the black people.
St. Patrick was a slave in Ireland.
Yes,
Right. It was in English.
Right.
That had been captured.
Simply a man-made construct for the purpose of dominance.
Let me interject to underscore what Algernon just put out there for you guys to discuss. The concept of race started with the English and started in the 19th century. You can look that up in etymology and find out when the concept came about. It came out in the 19th century.
I just wanted to add, I think that was a nice formulation. The notion of ethos is a good way to think about it. My colleagues who are things like population geneticists or physical anthropologists or biologists like to, when they hear what I study, will often sort of tease me. They'll say, wait, you study how kids learn about race, don't you know race isn't real? And what they mean is, even today, with our advanced understanding of genetics, racial variation does not summarize interesting, deep facts about people. And you can get an intuition being someplace like New York, where you look around a room like this. Try to make the sharp line that separates us into 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 groups. You can't, there's no principled way to do that. It arises out of systems of social stratification, and I think very often in, say, the American experiment, out of systems of power, the desire to preserve and maintain power relations and things of that nature. So on the one hand, race is not real. If you're a biologist, if you're looking for interesting and deep facts about how humans divide, then race is not real. However, if you're trying to understand the fabric of most modern societies, certainly our society, then you can't say race is not real, because it has a huge impact on people's life outcomes because of systems of inequality.
Well, is it race then, or is it culture? I mean, is it?
Well, culture is what creates ethos. That's what, you know, that's what worldview is. This really isn't a culture, it's a society that's based on dominance, and slavery is just a sister of capitalism. Pure and simple. So just, you know, as long as you have this capitalist system, you're going to have racism, because that's the construct.
So is there no racism in China?
Oh, sure.
I don't know. I'm asking the question. So there is, I mean, so, you know, there are racial structures in Asian countries. I mean, is racism a particular American
You go and hang out with the Tibetans and the Mongolians, they'll let you go.
I'm going to tell you that raciality is a learned disease, which is passed on from one generation to the next. This was amply demonstrated in the killing in the church in Charleston, South Carolina, where the murderer is a young man. Where did his thoughts to hate members of African Americans give birth? He's only been on this planet 20 some odd years. Using this example makes one ponder just how the prejudices and the racism found in America can be eradicated. And I can only give you what I have experienced. Okay, I remember growing up in Miami, Florida, and as a little girl, being sheltered by my family from separate water fountains, separate bathrooms, and legally not being able to sit at a counter at a White Castle eatery to order a hamburger. I remember going to my grandmother's funeral in Jacksonville, Florida at the age of 14, and my father telling me that she died of a heart attack because the hospital that the ambulance took her to would not allow her in the emergency room. I remember my father advocating until he obtained legislation in the state of Florida to prevent that from happening to another African American family. I coped with all of this by learning about myself, my culture, and my identity. Then well into my 30s, I concluded that racism wasn't going anywhere in the world. By that time, I had had personal experiences with racism in America, France, Germany, and Italy, all the places I've traveled to. I continued striving by changing my perception and concluded that racism is not my problem. It's the problem of the people who exhibit this behavior. However, that changes once you have children and you really have to find solutions.
Go ahead.
There's one problem I have. I agree with everything you say, but doesn't it fly in the face that we as blacks are not serious when in fact you hear the term N-I-G-G-E-R I mean, it's become a joke in our culture among the young. And now you even have the great Reverend Jesse Jackson's daughter wanting to be a rapper. I mean, I think that Jews, blacks, Irish, Italians, everyone needs a history lesson. The Irish history in this city was no glamour. And as a matter of fact, the Jews became so paranoid about the fact that they, who were Caucasians, they adopted themselves as a race in this city until recently. And so I'm saying, people are afraid of angering the wasp. We all wanted to appease the wasp at one time. And I gotta be honest, there's one thing I miss. Now that the wasps are no longer in power, the quality of our clothes are no good. The shoes, I can't get a decent pair of shoes. Now that we're all left to fend for ourselves, anyway, I'm being ridiculous.
Well, will you agree? So I want to talk about our president in the face of this thing. And I really feel strongly, I felt strongly, that without any intention, his election has exploded this idea here in a way that we have not had since the Civil Rights Movement. That somehow our election of an African American man to a conservative body of people, let's say, is so intolerable that I have gotten emails from friends, people that I would have called friends quite a while ago, that I'm shocked by the racial content in it, and it's almost entirely pointed at our president. And I wonder if you have any thoughts or commentaries about that.
I happen to believe, I didn't vote for the president the first time because I didn't trust him. I said, I didn't vote for the president.
You know what, I'm sorry. Could we maybe have some of the folks that are sitting just come in a little bit? There are people at the door that want to come in. Oh, good. Great.
Excuse me. I didn't vote for the president the first time.
Come on down, sweetheart.
I'm sorry.
Come right on down. Sit right here. Oh, that's good. Gotcha. I'm sorry. Come on down. Come on down. That's great.
I didn't vote for the president the first time because I didn't trust him. The second time I was forced to. And one of the reasons I still have to hold my nose when you mention things about the new Black America is that Obama has done something for everyone but Black America. And then the Reverend Al Sharpton tells us, wait until his second term. He's going to do something for us. Well, we're in his second term. He's done something for the illegal aliens. He's done something for the Jews. He's done something for the gays. But when it comes to black people, he goes, you got to take care of your kids. You know what I believe? You know what I believe? He's angry at his black father, who was probably a bum, and he's taking it out on every black male in this country, where you walk down the street, there's no black truck drivers. Blacks used to shine shoes. There's no black shoe shine. It's nothing. And our leadership sits there and said, we got to embrace everybody. When that head of city council got up and said, you got to take care of Puerto Rico, she was looking out for her people. You dig it? Why is it that blacks feel they have to appease every fucking group and before they do themselves? You know why? Because they don't feel worthy of their position. Because all the good black people died with the heroin holocaust of the 60s. Now we got the second, what do you call those second stringers right there now? And now they're representing us. I'm rambling, but Cheryl.
I have a different perspective on that. I think that, and I truly feel that we made a misperception of saying that Obama is African American. He's not like you and me. Obama's father is Kenyan and his mother is Caucasian. And he was raised in Hawaii with an Indonesian stepfather around no black folk. So the only thing that he knows about being African American is his wife, Michelle Obama. And secondly, I think it's not just his presence being in the White House that has got this anger and hate. If you go back and look at the data, what is happening now is the population is changing. Okay, and the Caucasian population will be in the minority, and they don't want to give that up.
Do you really believe that?
Oh, I believe that.
Hey, Hispanics are Caucasians too.
No,
as soon as they learn to speak English, they become white.
Let me finish. They will go against each other.
What's his name? Mitt Romney is a Latino. But because he's been educated and refined, he is now white. So don't include yourself with other people unless you can lift them up as an adjunct to your rights. You follow me? This thing about sitting back, well, everybody's like, you look in the mirror. I look in the mirror.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the data of the population is saying. I'm not even talking about how they think because they're light. I'm telling you what the Caucasian thinks because it's happening. And they see that as a loss of resources, a loss of dollars. And if they can't have it, they would rather destroy it. Now that's not to say that the populations in this mix are going to be even better, but I'm telling you, that's the driving force of this area.
I think I would like to say something. And the phrase that she mentioned, I think, was central to what you were saying, is that she had a perception, and she realized she was changing her perceptions, and that in changing her perceptions, she realized it was not her problem. But because you have children, and it affects the whole society, you have to do something about people's perceptions. Obama is perceived, or likes to be perceived, as black. And she just told us, oh, he's not black, but it's our perceptions. So that brings us back to the word that's the basis of this show, right? It's, what is it? It's racial reality, the two things, racial and reality. But the key to that word is perception. It's not the reality, it's the perception. But if you see it that way, it becomes real. And that's the tool of the wealthy ruling class, is they change our perceptions and they manipulate words. And all of the words that get kicked around, and we think, oh, these words are my words, I'm going to use them. And those words are your words, and that's you're the other, and you're the whoever you are. And we're getting divided by these words.
It's called social engineering.
It's social engineering. And what I'm trying to say is from the very beginning, listen to our music, listen to our arts. This is what really brings us together beyond the words that confuse you. And you can feel the love and the warmth and the rhythm that's in you, that's in our arts. And that brings us together. Don't trust the fucking words.
This young man back here would like to make a comment.
Just observing the...
I'm sorry. Excuse me, those of you that are in the doorway, it's quite difficult to have a conversation when you're also having a conversation. So either join us, or if you would, thank you. Go ahead.
I thought when you brought up the concept of Obama and his views of the African American community and what he's done, I thought it was interesting that in the conversation we started to engineer our own notions of his race, his connections to the community, and his responsibility. And in that discussion, it was almost an example of how we use race to strip people of power. I mean, he's the most powerful person in the world, and we're using our own notions of race and his responsibility to strip him of his power. And it's also an example of how race is used now, in terms of making a power structure and we're using it to almost take the most powerful man on the world and strip him of all the responsibility and the power he's shown us. I personally think he's done a lot for the black community.
Name something.
He's by
Affordable Care Act.
Affordable Care Act.
That applies to everyone.
Exactly. And it
Okay,
applies
but what did he do for
Wait a minute.
Wait a minute.
Wait a minute.
But that's not the point. That's not the point. We can go into this circle argument.
Would you let this gentleman finish his, what he's had to say?
I also think that it's important for us to recognize the conversation when we start to say, okay, he was raised by a white mother, he had a Kenyan father, and raised by Indonesians. I'm just saying that's something that happens here, but it happens everywhere. It's an example of a conversation that's heard. Okay, I'm not saying you say it. I'm just saying that's an example of a conversation that is used as I've heard a lot, and that I think no matter where he grew up, if he chooses to be part of black culture, culture is something you access yourself. Race is something that's imposed upon you by the social construct. So I think it's important to make that distinction.
Let me take your point a little bit. I'm going to ask a question. I want to bring up an individual to me that was absolutely fascinating of late, Rachel Donaldson. Now, Rachel Donaldson, for those of you that don't really remember, was that gal from the Midwest. She was a white gal raised by white parents who adopted black children, who married a black man, and suddenly, at some point along the line, started identifying herself as black. What's that all about? Does anyone have any insight into that?
I think I admired her because when look how many girls wanted to be Billie Holiday, or and nice white girls. I'm saying that one. I admire her because she did something while she embraced that identity. And what amazed me most is how some whites, I should qualify, reacted to it. It was like scary to see the reaction.
I have to say there is really, in my experience, and I brought this up to a lot of different people, black folk, when I say this to them, really kind of have your reaction, generally speaking, and white folks do not. They don't understand it, they are down on it, they think that, it's terrible really what she's done. And sometimes I wonder if they don't feel that way because they feel like somehow or other she's being racist. In some weird way. But I actually like to hear Yarrow because you study the brain a little bit.
So actually, I have a graduate student who's been doing some research related to this case and contrasting it with another case that's been in the news a lot lately, cases of transgender or transsexuality. And sort of the really kind of quizzical finding is that if you look at people's political orientation, liberals in the United States are very positive about the idea, or generally positive about the idea of choice in gender. You can decide to change your gender. You can even decide to change your sex. Maybe it takes a little extra, like a surgery or something like that. But both liberals and conservative, primarily whites, in the research that we've done, are united in saying, but you can't choose your race, you can't change your race. So sex, which is by far the most deeply biological of these categories, is considered something you can have agency in enacting, but not race. So I guess, I don't know exactly why this is. I would love to hear other people's thoughts about this. But among our participants are primarily whites. They are deeply uncomfortable, irrespective of political orientation, with the notion of race being something that one can sort of enact.
Is it something like blackface?
Is it something like putting on?
It's not like
It's definitely not. But that might be part of the anxiety of some white respondents.
What do you think about this, Cheryl? Do you have any thoughts?
Well, there have been many black folks who have changed their race and passed for white for a number of years for better opportunity and to enhance their families. So this is the reverse. My son happens to attend Howard University. Howard didn't take very kindly to that because she did not identify as black when she was at Howard.
She did not.
She did not. And as a matter of fact, she sued Howard University for reverse discrimination because she didn't get a job in the art school. So to see what she's put out there and to know what she's done, I have no respect for that.
So it's more. So you feel it is.
I think that she did that for drama. She's an art major. She plagiarized art. That's been proven. No one talks about her art. And I don't think that it's a matter of when someone's trying to pass because they sympathize with this cause and this position. I don't believe that.
So, Yarrow, what is it about our brains that when we get to a certain age, we start to see race?
So it's not clear that we inevitably would. I mean, there's a lot of input supporting the notion of seeing race. One of the things so what I think is something close to a natural part of human nature, perhaps not inevitable, but a strong tendency in our minds, is to want to think about things in terms of us and them. This is much broader than race. We're looking for perhaps an old tribal sense rooted in our evolutionary past. Who are our people? Who are not?
Universal tribal. I mean, you got to come back to ethos again and culture.
Yeah.
This that you're discussing, you can't use the language that puts people to sleep to wake them up. If you understand what I'm saying. Christendom, all of these terms, words mean domination. We could pinpoint in history with a couple of philosophers where this all started. The individual versus relationships, as the relational, as Native Americans speak of. So it's impossible to use this language and get to the bottom of this.
Which language in particular? Well, tribal or
when you use the word tribal,
yeah.
I don't even know what the hell that means. I mean,
well, let me make it really concrete.
tribe?
Let me make it really concrete. Okay? So my basic assumption is that we are animals. We are part of an evolutionary lineage. Our relatives are, our cousins are other primates.
What makes us different is culture.
But let me give you a very concrete example. 3-year-olds, I bring 3-year-olds into my lab, or I go to school, preschools, work with 3-year-olds. I have them draw a little token out of the bag that's red or blue. I say, oh, red, you're going to be in the red group.
Are they raised by wolves or what? I mean,
No.
you're born into a culture. This is not like some scientific experiment.
Absolutely.
It's culture that makes people have a different worldview and perspective about their environment.
We're 100% a blank slate, blank slate. There's nothing built into our minds of any sort. I mean, here's an example. A newborn baby in the first moments of life likes to look at faces more than other objects in the world. That's content built into our minds. I mean, that's not learned by culture. That's a baby. They're literally moments after birth. Okay? So there is some structure in the human mind, and my assumption as a cognitive scientist, as someone who studies this, is that we need to find out what that structure is. We can't go in blind. I agree a lot of it is culture. I think we agree about a lot. But I guess I have the assumption that it's an open question whether there are biases built into our mind that affect how these things play out. And if they're there, we better know about them. Otherwise, we're flying blind. Otherwise, our efforts to make things better are going to stall out when we're not aware of the sort of the true structure that's there that we need to take into account. So that's my assumption.
I think as artists, however, we're not scientists. And as artists, we perceive that the crucial pivotal point that drives all of these difficulties is cultural. So I'm not worried about science. I'm not after to find out these kinds of what's biological.
Right.
I want to show us to look at the perceptions that are manipulated and the words, how they get manipulated, and to realize to protect ourselves and to know that we can love people and feel close to each other regardless of what words they like to spout.
I'm going to pause this one more time. Folks, if you're having a conversation inside and you're not over here, could you take it outside?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. This gentleman's been trying to speak.
Yeah. All right, so I think at the onset, I think I need to address the fact the word racialism is a gentrified term. What we're really talking about is racism, you know, which has a lot more emotional impact, I think, on all of us. And really, I think it's moving past that. I think we're racism and ethnocentrism and otherism and so on, all these isms are part of the, unfortunately, part of the
Western mind.
yeah, well, part of the human psyche.
Part of the Western mind.
Excuse me, may I finish? I'm not arguing with you, I'm just saying, they're part of they're part of our psyche, you know, and skin color, hair texture, the shape of the nose. I mean, these are such basic, primitive ways that we define and profile other people, ourselves and other people, that it is, it's almost ludicrous, but the reality is that is what we do as a species. We define others as, you know, based on their physical appearance, their disabilities, their skin color, their ethnicity, and so on. With due respect to the gentleman that I felt like perhaps had every right to, you know, say that, you know, the Native American population in this country has been completely marginalized in these discussions. But moving on from that, I wanted to put that not to rest, but I wanted to make that clear. I just think that, you know, we need to look for commonalities instead of differences, and that's the whole issue. We're always thinking about why these people are different. What also the other issue is, yeah, race and, you know, and ethnicity, so, but also class. When people get enough money, let's face it, we don't really give a shit that much anymore. If they have enough money, they can pretty much join the, you know, the good old boy club And the rest of us
No,
will have
ask Taggerwood and ask OJ if you can join the old boys club.
I'm just saying,
No
you know,
matter- and Bill
we're all
Cosby.
kind of stuck behind
Bill
the,
Cosby.
we're all kind of stuck in the woodshed, you know.
When they want to show you you're black, they know how to swim.
Okay, no,
let me
I'm not,
jump in here.
I'm not putting racism in the back burner. Believe me, it is the defining issue of our times. I'm just saying it's also class.
What y'all gonna do about it?
Wealthy people, you know,
Let me say something. What you gonna do about
they.
it? What you gonna do? What you have to do about it? This is what I'm gonna do about it. I'm gonna draw a circle there and I'm gonna put fair in it. Now I don't care whether you like me or not. Deal with me fairly. That's how I meet everybody now. I meet everybody.
It's no peace, man.
I meet everybody like that. But you wanna know the way the relationship is gonna go. It's either gonna get better or get worse. So I meet them fairly.
Do you mean equal under the law?
I mean equal under the heart.
Under the moral.
You can't change nothing in no man, no woman until you change it in the heart. Because the mind is slick. And the mind is manipulative. Everything everybody's talking in here is one-upmanship. You want to learn something? Be fair. 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 Fair is the word.
That's great. Let me bounce off that a little bit.
Yeah.
And then this woman would like to say something. Harper Lee wrote a book called To Kill a Mockingbird. You probably have heard of it. And she recently just wrote another book, or released another book called To Set a Watchman, that has exploded the concept of her father, Atticus Finch, who was thought to be really and portrayed as almost a deity, really, in terms of white civilization. In this next book, I'm not going to give anything away about the book, but I want to read you a little. This book, To Set a Watchman, if you have read To Kill a Mockingbird, you must go out and read this book. It is transformative on every level. But let me just read you a short, really brief passage. Scout, a grown-up Jean Louise Finch, has come back to Macomb County to visit her family. And she's had some strange experiences that she doesn't understand, and she goes to her Uncle Jack, who's a doctor, and Atticus's brother. And her Uncle Jack says this to her, and it goes with this gentleman was saying, and it goes kind of to what you were saying. Dr. Finch held his cigarette with his thumb and his two fingers. He looked pensively. "You're colorblind, Jean Louise," he said. "You always have been and you always will be. The only difference you see between one human and another are differences in looks and intelligence and character and the like. You've never been prodded to look at people as a race, and now that race is the burning issue of the day, you're still unable to think racially. You see only people." I'm gonna wrap us up a little bit. I'm gonna tell a brief story about myself. I was having a conversation with someone about a work of art, and it was done by a black artist, and I didn't really care for it. And she said, "That's because you're racist." And I said to her, "You're confusing my arrogance with racism." I said, I celebrate the excellence in anyone, no matter where it comes from, in whatever form. And also I think that our seeing, not being colorblind, our seeing each other for who we are as individuals, and celebrating that their achievements and their differences, as well as from their own history to what they are doing themselves individually in the moment, is what is really important. To see each other, to see the humanity in each other, to be fair in that assessment of them, and to acknowledge that. But I think a lot, and I wonder about technology, because I feel like with technology we don't see each other anymore. We see screens. We see this monoculture that we hold in our hands that tells us everything that are boo-boo kitties, that make us feel great about ourselves, and can, there's a whole thing about what's going on campuses right now with political correctness and how it's perverting. Comedians won't even play college campuses anymore because kids don't have a sense of humor. But we have to keep our sense of humor. We have to be able to laugh at ourselves and to enjoy the work of other folks. And I hope that is some of what you guys will get out of this. I hope that the conversation continues. I want to thank the panelists from the bottom of my heart. It's really been terrific, and I so much enjoyed it. here. We're going to set up for some music. You're welcome to stay. Of course, you can go, but if you want to stick around and have a conversation, we'd love to have you. Thank you so much.
You say yours, I say mine.